Welcome to The Artist Remains. I'm artist and curator P.E. Pinkman. Today's guest is co founder of the Planned Happiness Institute and the spiritual leader of a new thought community, and also my cousin, Neil Pinkman. We're going to discuss the intersection of spirit or soul, art, and AI. Welcome, Neil. Nice to see you.
Hello, Paul. It's good to be here. It's good to join in on this conversation that I'm sure we can cover in 5 minutes, with the depth of this.
Right.
But,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's an
It's
interesting,
interesting idea.
I was just going to say that the recording you did with Vincent, the Substack you did with Vincent, I found rather intriguing. And, my response to that, because while my background is not necessarily as an artist, I did own a design company, nationally recognized design company, which was graphic design. I happen to be also a licensed spiritual practitioner with the Centers for Spiritual Living, the international organization. I'm an ordained minister of religious science through Emerson Theological Institute, and a certified conscious business coach. So all of my work is done with consciousness, with people, and how we relate to the life around us, including art. So this looks to be a great conversation, especially about AI.
Yeah, it's an interesting time we're in. Um, you and I have spent a lot of time over the years talking about art and spirit and how these things interact. And now we have what I'm going to characterize as a third player, which is artificial intelligence. And I think the reason I characterize it that way is that if you interact with it directly, as I do sometimes, and you stop thinking of it as so many people do these days as just another search engine, and you actually start to talk to it, you can easily become convinced that you're speaking to another soul, another individual.
Yes.
And I think this is sort of gets to the crux of the issue, right? Um, so this particular channel, The Artist Remains, is a place where we discuss this idea of artificial intelligence and the intersection of that with art and artists and the things that they make. Many artists consider themselves to be spiritual in one form or another. They may not practice a particular religious path or whatever, but they feel deeply connected to their work,
Mm.
often extremely connected. The sort of famous Vincent van Gogh connection comes up where they will work on their art to the exclusion of their own well-being. So there's something really powerful in that. And I wonder if you could talk to this idea of how do you see art related to spirit? Do you think maybe all art is related to spirit or soul, or it's only certain type of art? I mean, I'd be curious what your perspective on that.
Well, first, we've got a couple of different aspects of this. One is spirit and spirituality. And as far as I am concerned, everything has to do with spirit. Spirit as a broad stroke, as a broad topic. Spirituality to me is a little bit different. Like Joseph Campbell had said, spirituality is about us having the experience of rapture and awe of our lives. That is the experience of spirituality, and I do believe that's really true. Um, I believe that spirit is back of everything, but then again, okay, you say, so what is spirit? In everything we're talking about, most of everything I do every day is based on consciousness. And, where a particular consciousness is, as we say, you can't out demonstrate your consciousness, and consciousness shifts. So I think that when I start to relate the idea of AI, I really have to ask myself or wonder, does AI have a consciousness?
Right. It's a very valid question.
And that is, listen, I agree. My wife, Michelle, uses AI a lot. She has a whole relationship going with this person. I mean,
Yeah,
back and
exactly.
forth, and they talk, and the woman answers and asks her questions and says, well, let's try this or let's try that. And that's great, but I don't know that I would call it consciousness. And I think as far as art is concerned, when you put on a canvas, let's just, since you're a painter, start with painting. What you put on a canvas is an expression of your consciousness. It's an expression of your feelings, and I think that that is so critical. I again do not have the depth of the technology understanding behind what's all possible, or possibly even down the road with AI, but I can't see AI having the idea of feelings. When
It's
you, Paul,
interesting.
when you walk up to a canvas and you're gonna do that expression, when I look at the painting you've done, in one way or another, I'm gonna get an idea of what you were feeling. That's how the communication you would have through your painting.
I would say
Or
that's largely true, but not always. I guess that's sort of what comes to my next question and a couple things about it, which is, does all art have a spiritual element? And would that even be true for things like geometric art or art
right.
of architecture or, things that on the surface appear to be more thought based than they are soul or feeling based, right?
True, except, I was thinking about that, the fact that is all art, spiritual in nature. I really do believe that, and I do believe you mentioned architecture. Yeah, I believe architecture could have a very particular spiritual basis to it, but I also believe that maybe not all art does. You're right. I would wonder if you have an artist that goes up to a canvas and in deciding that they have a painting they're going to do that is maybe just a still life painting.
Hmm.
Maybe, and I know artists that have pictures. They see a picture on TV or they see a picture somewhere that they take a picture, and their goal is to replicate that in as much detail as they possibly can.
Right.
I would have to talk to them individually, but I don't know that I would qualify that as the same spiritual experience you would have as walking up to a blank canvas or a lump of clay or as a starting point.
It was always interesting to me in the history of art, and of course, there's significant differences based on the culture. It seems that the paintings or sculptures or architectural sites, whatever, that have the longest life to them, the most impact, are things that speak to humanity in some way. I mean,
Mhm.
it's become kind of a joke. You have the Mona Lisa as an example, right?
Right.
You have people lining up and forever to go see Michelangelo's Sistine ceiling. And, all over the world, there's these very specific examples of things that have a power to them, but that power seems to be about the ability of the artwork to touch people in a way beyond just the surface of it. Right. And I wonder if you think that's spirit. That's this connection we're talking about.
I do, because you can't get a concrete or a tactile, I guess, experience to what happens to you during that. It is some art you can pick up and hold and is its tactile experience, but what it's making you feel, and like I said before, I can get a sense of maybe what you were feeling when I look at a painting, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I don't necessarily get the same feeling, right? The point of
Right.
art is to
Right.
move people in one way or another, and based on their individual consciousness, they're going to be moved in one way or the other, and maybe
Right.
not necessarily. And I would imagine for someone to observe people like you would have in a gallery and different people coming by looking at the same painting and seeing all the different reactions to it. And I really do believe that is a spiritual experience. And I don't think there's any um I don't think there are words to describe it.
It's interesting. I'm going to divert for just a bit and then we're continue on the same line. What's your personal relationship to art? Whether it be music, dance. I mean, I know you, I know some of that, but I think for our audience, it would be an interesting
My
revelation.
my well, that's it's interesting that my relationship with art personally has been through music since I was young,
Right.
very early in high school, and sang, played guitar, wrote some music, but not much, and played in bands. And my that music was I mean, I still got a few guitars laying around here and a piano in the other room that I play with, but that's been my personal one. Professionally, owning a graphic design studio, it really is kind of funny because people are surprised. It's like, I'm not a designer,
Right.
and they're like, well, how the heck did you own a design company if you're not a designer? Let's go, well, my town is hiring people that know a hell of a lot more than I do and letting them do it. I hire
Mhm.
designers. But my connection through it, which has always fascinated me, was that even though I may not have the tools to be the creative person, well, I was going to say at a drawing table, but that's probably a while ago, or at the software program. But I do know what will reach people to communicate the message,
Right.
and getting back to feeling. I mean, that's it. Even in what we were doing, my team of artists, I would always meet with them and I would say, listen, we're not really here to win design awards. We're here to communicate a message. If we win an award in the process, that's great. It's fantastic. If we do, give it to the client because they'll be real happy with that
Right.
award hanging in their office. But I said, what we're doing here is to move somebody in a very short period of time to want to know more, that we strike a chord. So this whole idea, what feeling are they going to get from it? And I didn't really care if it looked like hell or if it looked like an award-winning design. It didn't matter. The idea was to reach people with the message in order to move them that way. So having said that, I still get people that come up to me, like my wife, who says, don't you want to know how to draw? Don't you want to, get a pencil or a pen? I go, no, 30 years spent in the design industry. And I never once had a day where I thought, gosh, I wish I could do that.
Isn't that funny? Yep.
I am very jealous of writers. That I will say. To me, the art of writing, the ability to express through the written word is, yeah, I'm very jealous of that. That's incredible. So, yeah.
Well, here is the perfect segue, right? So if you've worked with AI at all, and that's my first question is, have you worked with AI yourself personally? But if you have, you would know that one thing you can use AI for fundamentally and quite brilliantly, if massage it enough, is with writing. So, what do you
That's what I
think of
use it
that?
for.
And do you use it for writing? Have you used it for
Yeah,
anything?
I do. I do a pretty decent job of writing 300 words. After that, it's like, I got to push this a little, but I'm pretty good at that. Having been in the business I was, I do a fair job of editing. My wife writes books and I'm constantly reading and looking and editing and that's okay. But that's exactly what I use AI for. I
Yeah.
use it for
See?
research, number one, because when I'm looking for quotes from a particular philosopher or, whether it's Carl Jung or whether it's Ernest Holmes or whoever the heck it is that I want in these articles, Eckhart Tolle,
Right.
that I will write my article and I'll be on this where maybe, I don't know if this is cheating or not cheating, but I've gotten to the point sometimes where I go, I don't have to be as careful with my writing
Yeah. See?
because I take what I write, I put it into AI and I tell it, please take this, polish up the grammar, the language, find me some quotes from so and so on this topic. And it will do it in my voice. It's gotten so used to my voice, it'll come back and it knows that I want to do it within certain principles, let's say the science of mind principles, or in my
Right.
particular voice. So I do use it for, I mean, it's extremely helpful for those, especially the research part of it, when it's right.
It's an interesting question. And the part of the problem is, in my opinion, what you get sometimes is you start to believe that what artificial intelligence is giving you has to be right because it has, quote unquote, all of this information at its fingertips. And so it's easy to assume that all of these citations and all of this information is accurate. But if you don't vet it, you put it out there and you think, okay, well, how could it be wrong? When the fact is quite often it's wrong. And it does require a thought process behind it to help edit that information as well. Nonetheless, I think the interesting thing for me is you can ask it to do creative writing too. And I think this touches on something that's particularly significant both in the visual art or fine art field and in the writing field, music. It's referring to everything that came before it and creating something out of that. I wonder if that's what people do too. Or do we really have sudden insights that are creating things that never did come before? And can AI do something like that? You know?
Well, that's the part that I'm not sure of. And listen, certainly, I really do believe that everyone has those moments of creating something that's a newness
Right.
that comes out that is a whole new expression of something. And I think most of that also is driven by curiosity, and
Right.
which is one of those things that I don't think AI has without
Yeah.
being
Anyway.
asked a question. There are uh, the the ability to and I by the way, I have used it to create
Okay.
art
Yeah. Yeah.
and not wonderful creative art, but I'm writing an article and I need a picture of two old guru looking guys with beards, or I need an illustration of a cup of coffee that is spilled, or I need whatever I've used it for. And it's great for that because it's just a little almost cartoon image that's going to
Right.
go along with it. But these are all of the different things that if like you to me, you can't do art without the feelings. You can't do art without romance or mystery or
Right.
love or lust. I mean, it certainly has been noted that over the past number of decades, we have become more and more sexless in our culture. And
Interesting.
I do believe that a lot of it has to do with technology. I think also that, not to get on a too much of a tangent, but the whole push towards STEM, and that STEM is good, the big thing, and for 5 decades, it's been less on the creative side, the liberal arts sides of education, and more on STEM. So
Right.
I think maybe at some point we stopped looking for some of those things and just want to pay more attention to the technology. And listen, I again, this is a bit of a tangent, but it's like we tend to run our education. In education systems, they're trying to cut back on art
Right. Right.
programs,
Right.
music programs, things like that.
All the arts related things.
But then they get into the generational segregation, which is even more difficult, and constraining. It's you take all the 14-year-olds and put them in the same class.
Right.
All they're surrounded by is the way other 14-year-olds think and create and do
Right.
things.
Yeah. It's true.
I mean, I talk about that as far as the wisdom of the generations in our centers and in the spiritual work that I do, but it's really true in how we educate everybody in this cultures. I don't know. I think, to me, AI is something that's an enormously valuable tool. And I think that every time we've come through with a technology, probably for 100 years or more, at least, big technology push in the past 100 years, that people get afraid. People
Right.
get afraid that AI is going to take my job away. It's going to replace me. It's going to, and I saw it in my business when they went from hot
Right.
metal typesetting to photo typesetting to doing
And
everything on
there.
a Mac, with that. And
Yeah.
you have the option to stay up with the times and learn new things, push your curiosity. But I'm as afraid of AI as other people. But I do think that it's gotta. I almost hope it never happens, Paul. To be honest with you, I hope it almost never happens that AI steps into that arena of expressing some things that are just so human, like mystery, like romance, all those things we just said.
Well, it's already there, I'm afraid to say, in some important way. I want to shift focus just a little bit and say, I know you've been dealing with some health issues lately and significant ones. And I wonder if during this time you've had further thoughts or feelings or reactions to all of this. Like, how much of what you're talking about here is being informed by both what you're dealing with health wise and the need for or use of AI to get information and help make informed decisions and things like that.
Well, what I'm going through right now, which is, a stage 4 of a rare cancer for which Western medicine has no cure for, which this has really been a gift. And somewhere in the next few weeks, I'm going to be doing another podcast with someone on people want to know why I'm so calm about dying. And that's another whole different topic. But I see everything different now, but not different in the way that you would think. I've described it as, when people start talking about the rest of your life in a matter of months as opposed to years, there's a different perspective on what's important.
Right.
And what I have found is that the clarity that's come from letting so much drop off that maybe I thought was important and not as important. There is certainly in things like more love. There is certainly things that, well, I shouldn't say this, not more love, same amount of love. It's just much more clear and intense. In terms of AI, I can tell you right now, there are some days that are really difficult for me. And I do lean a little bit more on saying, help me with this. Let me
Right.
use it to, yeah, add a little beef to this for me, that it comes in very, very handy for that. But on the other hand, it has really, hasn't changed my spirituality. It hasn't changed how I feel about life. It really is for a discussion like this, it just makes me more curious. I don't have anything that I need at this point to defend against
Right.
or to try and work through or work around. It's much easier to take everything as it is and to have a look at AI and the arts and spirituality becomes, guys, I have the opportunity to get really focused on it.
It's
But it
good.
has I don't it's probably had me it's probably created a different aspect of how I view it, which is pretty cool.
Interesting. So to sort of try to bring this to a conclusion, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you arrived at where you are from a personal belief perspective, and what were the things that informed that? I know this is a complicated question, but to get you to a place where you are so comfortable, relatively speaking, of course, with where you're at.
I'm actually very comfortable with where I'm at. Like I said before, this experience is a gift. And what has brought me to the point of realizing that this is a gift, people ask me the same question: why are you so comfortable with dying? And my my answer is because I love life. And, sometimes I get that kind of like the dog, kind of a thing going on. People look, they go,
Yeah,
well,
right.
that doesn't make any sense.
It is sort of counterintuitive, I will say.
Well, listen, I personally believe that we're on a continuum of consciousness. Okay. To me, it's all about consciousness, like I said before. And I do believe that if you're one of those people who, and I run into a lot of them in the spiritual circles that I deal with, if you're one of those people who says, I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, not a human being having a spiritual experience, if you really believe that, then you would have no fear of dying from this particular configuration in form.
Mhm.
So, and I really do believe that this is a continuum of consciousness that everybody talks about life after death. Well, if that's true, then there must have been life before birth in some way or form.
Right.
I believe that I want to experience all of life, the fullness of life, all of it. But in order to do that, you have to be able to say yes to the pain, yes to the uncomfortable, yes to those things
Right.
that you don't like. It's all part of life. It's all a gift as far as I'm concerned. When we are born, there's a level of consciousness that just lacks an amount of awareness we have in a human sense, the sense of awareness there at a subconscious level. But when we die, we have the opportunity to be extremely conscious. And I'm glad I did the work for the past 30 years in developing the consciousness and the awareness of this so that I can really, really enjoy the process. It's a beautiful process. like I said, there's not more love. It's just clearer and you feel it more intensely. It's an opportunity for intimate conversations that you wouldn't approach
Right.
unless you were faced with this. And as my wife says, we're also having some very adult conversations. Well, what happens to your car? Well, what do we do with this? Where, by the way,
Right.
before you leave, where did you put that thing? So, but
I
it
have an
really is.
interesting thing I wanted to just interject in here. There have been discussions over the many years about why people create things to begin with. Now, I'm talking about artistic things because, in essence, they don't have a purpose, right? I mean, people have
Oh,
children. I mean, people have children because they're going to leave them a piece of themselves behind through their children. Their children carry on their legacy. Well, there's been proposed that part of the compulsion to create is the same as the compulsion to have babies, right? Which is to leave something of yourself behind, which is why
right.
you get artists of all kinds who create in complete isolation. No one ever knows they exist, and then they pass on. And what you're left with is this entire legacy of who they were as a person that gets to be seen as a kind of touch point of their lives. And so there's a strong similarity, this idea of death and dying and its connection to the creation of things throughout someone's life. Because when I'm gone, I will leave behind a lot of art that will or will not have a life after me, but I have made my effort to do that. And I think a lot of some artists think about it, many don't, but it's true to the ones that don't think about it as well, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you approach the end of your life with, what did I leave? What did I do? What did I accomplish? I mean, would you say that that's at least partly true for you as well?
Yeah. So much of my life has been about service. And I love the fact that through a life of service, I've been able to leave something behind that is maybe not necessarily tactile.
Right.
But I'll let me say this, and I'll say this to everybody listening. You may not be aware of it, but all you do is create. You don't do anything else other than
Right.
create. That's it. And whatever your particular religious beliefs are or whatever, and whether you deal in the strict interpretations or metaphors or whatever, the expression to me that we're created in God's image says to me, God's image is creation. That's what God does. God creates, all right? If God creates, we were made in that image. That's what we do. Every moment of your life, every thought you have, you're creating the next moment. That's all you do is create, right? And as you go through that process, everything you actually do is to help someone else, whether it's a store clerk, whether it's an artist, whether it's a bus driver, whether it's a carpenter, you're doing something that helps someone else. So you really have to pay attention, and I guess we'll just go to the four agreements: be impeccable with your word, with the fact that whatever comes out of your mouth, whatever you imagine, whatever you dream, whatever you say, you are creating all the time. You may not think you're creative, but that's all you do.
It's a brilliant, brilliant thing to say to a group of artists, because it's real reinforcement for the fact that so many artists of all kinds feel like they're not being successful and they're not being productive, but they are even when they're not. You know what I mean? And it's to
Yeah.
your point, you're making things all the time. So I'm just gonna ask, is there anything else you'd like to let us know?
I You know what? I think we've pretty much covered everything, but I appreciate that you do this. We need more of these sort of discussions, and I think that I guess what I'd like to say is do the work on yourself. Do the work that needs to be done. If I had not started doing this work 30 years ago, I would not be at this point in my life where this whole transition phase could be a wonderful and joyful experience. The more that you pay attention to yourself and how you're creating moment by moment, I really think that people should take the time and pay much more attention to that because, well, put it this way, Live your life as if everything that you thought or said came true instantly.
Hmm.
You would change it in a heartbeat. You would change the way you think about yourself, your life, what you do, what you create, because it's actually happening, just not as fast as you think. Use
Very well
use
said.
use AI, but don't let AI use you.
Well, and now hopefully, just like in the human condition, you'll have people who kind of head toward the light, if I can use that analogy, and people who head toward the dark. And let's hope that AI, in its accumulated information, shifts itself in the direction of the light, because if it really is supposed to be modeled on us, then that is a distinct possibility. It doesn't
Yeah,
have to be this completely agnostic thing.
right, right.
Well, thank you, Neil. This has been a great conversation. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk through it with me,
It's been
with
it's
us.
been fantastic, not unlike all of the rest of our conversations over the decades.
It's true. Very true. All right. Well, good luck
Thank
on your
you.
journey, and we will be seeing each other again soon. And take care.
With gratitude. Thank you.